Hi everyone, in this video I want to show a gameplay between International Master Soltanici Ruslan from Moldova and International Master Dan Bogdan from Romania. This game was played in Arad Chess Festival from 2019 round 9. It was an interesting game because Soltanici created many weaknesses in the opening which attacked them in the middle game and endgame and won the game. I would like to analyze this game from the point of view of opening, middle game and endgame. In the opening we need to develop our pieces, make castle and connect the rooks by moving the queen. Basically in the opening we need to follow the principle of the least active piece, meaning that we need to bring our pieces into the game and place them on the most forward squares. Also pawn moves are good only if they help us to develop a piece. Ruslan started with e4 and Bogdan replied with c5, and we have the Sicilian opening: knight to f3, knight to c6, d4, c takes on d4, knight takes on d4, and black continue with g6, intending to fianchetto his bishop, and this is known as accelerated dragon. In this position white can continue with c4 and enter the Rxh7 structure, but he opted to develop a piece, which is the best option in the opening, and played knight to c3, bishop to g7, taking the knight for the second time, defending, knight to f6. In this moment white can develop his last minor piece with bishop to c4, but he decided to take on c6 in order to drive the knight away, and we can notice that white created an isolated pawn on a7 for black. After this we had e5, knight to g8, and e5 is an advanced pawn, which is attacked for the moment by the bishop. White defended this pawn with bishop to d4, and this pawn is a target for black. On one hand, white pushed the knight back, but now he has to worry to defend this pawn. Black attacked it for a second time with the queen, f4, f6, queen to e2, preparing long castle, and black took on e5, bishop takes. We have some exchanges in the center, and black continue his development with knight to a6. It seems that he wants to castle short. White play long castle, knight to f7, pressuring this pawn, but this allows white to sacrifice this pawn in order to create more weaknesses, and white played d6, d takes on e6, and we can see that black has many weaknesses, and white can transfer the game into an endgame. White continue with g3, intending to develop the last minor piece, and since we have opposite side castling, we'll have a sharp game where each player will storm his pawns towards the enemy king. Short castle. In this position we notice that black has some darker weaknesses around his king. Bishop to g2, and with this move white finishes opening. His king is safe, rooks are connected, and all other pieces are developed. Rook to b8, placing the rook on the open file, and in this middle game position white plan is to start attacking black weaknesses. In our case we have the isolated pawn from a7, c6, and the two double pawns from the e file. After we identify the pawn weaknesses, we need to look at all our pieces and involve them into the attack. The queen can go to c4, pressuring these two pawns. The rook from h1 can come to e1, looking at the double pawns. The same for the rook from d1, it can come to e1 or go to c4 via d4 and pressure this pawn. The knight can come to d4, looking at these two weaknesses. The bishop is well placed on this square, looking at c6, and in some other lines he can go to h3, pressuring e6 pawn. So in the middle game we need to compose a plan. We need to spend some time, 5 to 10 minutes, to find the pawn weaknesses and involve our pieces into the attack. After this we can move faster since we know what to do. This is a common mistake of players. They make moves without having a clear plan in their head. Another important thing is to update our plan every time we have a change in material or pawn structure. A good plan for white is to transfer the game into the endgame by exchanging some pieces. If the number of pieces is smaller than the number of weaknesses in black camp, he will be able to attack these weaknesses easily. Okay, let's see the game continuation. White played queen to c4, attacking these pawns. Black replied with queen to b6, counter attacking b2. White played knight to a4, attacking the queen and controlling b2 square. Queen to a3 check, king to b1, knight to e5 attacking the queen, queen to d4 proposing the queen exchange, and black accepted this, which is a questionable decision because it's in favor of white. So we have an endgame position where white has two correct endgame plans. One, continue to attack opponent weak pawns, which we already know from the middle game, and the second plan is to push the pass pawns, which for the moment black doesn't have any pass pawn. White knows what to attack and he needs to involve his pieces, and we already know what to do from the middle game. The game continues with rook to f2, attacking the bishop, bishop to h3. Another way for the bishop was to go to the central square e4, king to f7, giving more protection to e6 pawn, but h7 backward pawn is unprotected. We need to make a mental note about this change and at the right time attack this pawn. White continue with b3, closing the rook file. Better for white was to continue attacking black weak pawns with knight to c4, pressuring e6 pawn. In an endgame we need to be careful with pawn moves. The part that attacks should move pawns, while the part that defends should be careful with pawn moves because they can become an easy target. Black continue with king to e8, knight to c5. The pawn is attacked twice, and black played knight to f3, attacking the rook, rook to a4, attacking a7, knight to g5, attacking the bishop, bishop to f1, e5. This is a good move because it's freeing the bishop diagonal. Knight to d3, attacking the rook and the pawn. Black defends this pawn with rook to f5, bishop to g2, pressuring this pawn. e4. In this moment, black gives back the pawn, but he's taking this bishop. Rook takes on e4, rook to f7, defending this pawn. Knight to e5, attacking the rook and the pawn. Rook to f6, defending. And since there is no attacking move for white, he needs to bring more pieces into the game. White did this with rook h to e1, looking at e7 pawn. Bishop to f5, attacking the rook, rook to a4, attacking the pawn, defending. And what should white do here? He should continue to attack black weaknesses, and for this he could play a rook to c4, attacking this pawn for a second time. Instead he played g4, attacking the bishop, bishop to c8 and g5. This is a good move because in an endgame we need to block opponent pawns, and this move does this. One single pawn manages to block two pawns. Black continue with rook to e6. Better was to put the rook on f2, attacking h2. Rook a to e4, rook to c7, but the rook is very passive on this square. Another way for the rook was to go to b5, counter-attacking g5 pawn. In this moment white goes for the other weak pawns that is no longer protected and plays a rook to h4, and black is not able to defend this pawn. King to f8, rook takes on h7, and white manages to win a pawn, and he has a pawn majority on the king side. Every time we have a change in material or pawn structure, we need to change our plan. In our case, white should start implementing the second correct plan in the endgame to push his pass pawn. White can try to create a pass pawn, but much better is to take this pawn for free and have two connected pass pawns, which is a winning advantage. Black continue with king to g8, attacking the rook, rook to h4, c5, rook h to e4, allowing the knight to move, rook to d6, knight to c4. White prevents black from going to d2 square, and also e7 pawn is attacked twice, so black defends this pawn, and it seems that black manages to hold all his weaknesses. So now it's a good time to start implementing the other plan to create a pass pawn on the king side, and he played h4, king to g7, king to b2, improving the king position, king to g8. Black is waiting, and white can go forward with the knight to e5, taking the rook and the pawn. But in the game he played another move, rook 4 to e3. White is also waiting black to see what he wants to play, but white focus in this position are the advanced pawn from c5, isolated pawn from e7, g6 and a7. We can notice that the black king is restricted to the last two ranks, so if by a miracle both white rooks will arrive on f7 and f8, it will be mate. In this case, black will need to make some defensive move to move the pawn forward, which will make it weak, or move the rook back to the last rank, and again this pawn will become weak. Let's see the game continuation, where black played king to g7, knight to e5, rook to d6, and white started to move the rooks on the f file with a rook to f1, and he can infiltrate on f7. Black stops this for the moment, but this move allows white to push the pawn forward, and black cannot take because he's losing the bishop. So black defended this bishop, but white goes forward with h6, giving a check, and in this moment white has a protected pass pawn on h6, and this is winning for white. King to h8. White needs to be careful not to allow black to infiltrate on d2 and then to g2 and attack this backward pawn. So he played knight to c4, attacking the rook and controlling d2 square, rook to d8, rook to e5, attacking this pawn, and here black made a mistake. He wanted to trade rooks, but this is very good for white due to black weaknesses. Indeed, black he manages to fix his pawn structure, but he has too many weaknesses. After this move, white played knight to e3, forking the pawn and the bishop, bishop to e4. This is the final mistake of the game, and the drawback of this move is that the f file was freed, and white gives a check on f8, and black resigned after this move. A possible continuation would be king to h7, knight to g4, threatening mate on f6. So black is forced to control this square with rook to c6, rook to f7, king to g8, rook to g7, king to f8, rook takes on a7, and white is threatening now mate in two moves. So black has to play king to g8, knight to f6 check, black has to take, check, king to h8, g takes on f6, g5, f7, king takes on h7, f8, queen, king to g6, he's trying to run, but queen to f7 check, king to h6, rook to a6 check, and this is the only way to block the check, and we have mate. So winning this game, Soltanici Ruslan won Arad Chess Festival. Congratulations to him. And here we can see a list with the top 10 players. From left to right we have International Master Korodesky David, which took 3rd place, International Master Konstahi Michnia, who took 7th place, International Master Makovei Andrei, who took the 9th place, International Master Soltanici Ruslan, 1st place, Grandmaster Master Vasilis Dimitris, 2nd place, Grandmaster Zvetushkin Dmitry, 10th place, Grandmaster Jean Vlad Christian, 8th place, Grandmaster Străcescu Andrei 6th place, International Master David Alexandru Vasile 5th place, and FIDE Master Skitko Ivan that took 4th place. If you like this video, click on the like button, share this video, watch other games from my channel, leave some comments and suggestions in the comment section. See you next time. Bye.